Welcome to NTD News. I'm Kevin Hogan. Here are today's top stories. President Trump says a lot of big things are coming in the next few days. He's talking about alleged 2020 election fraud, which he calls a disgrace to our country. Trump's legal team appeals a decision in Michigan on early election lawsuit. It's asking the state's top court to declare that Michigan's Secretary of State acted unconstitutionally. Arizona Republicans are calling to decertify election results, citing issues that need to be resolved. Some of them say if the state doesn't decertify, they'll call on Congress to take action. And Sidney Powell files an appeal in her Georgia election lawsuit. A judge dismissed it on Monday, but Powell says she wants to take it to the Supreme Court. A new Supreme Court lawsuit from Texas takes aim against Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin. It accuses the states of unconstitutionally changing election laws. The suit alleges voters were not treated equally in those states, and that loosened restrictions for ballot integrity led to significant irregularities. The SCOTUS motion says these issues prevent the country from knowing who actually won the election and threaten to cloud all future elections. The lawsuit is asking the nation's highest court to block electoral college votes from those 4 states from the final count. The cumulative electoral votes in the 4 states are enough to determine the outcome of the 2020 election. President Trump says big things are coming in the next couple of days. He's talking about the allegations of fraud in the 2020 election.
President Trump told reporters on Monday that a lot of big things will happen in the coming days.
It's like from a third world nation, and I think the case has been made, and now we find out what we can do about it. But you'll see a lot of big things happening over the next couple of days.
His team is pressing hard into allegations of election fraud in multiple states. President Trump says the election was a disgrace to our country.
These ballots pouring in from everywhere using machinery that nobody knows ownership, nobody knows anything about. They have glitches, as they call them, glitches. The glitches weren't glitches. They got caught sending out thousands of votes, all against me, by the way.
The president has repeatedly said the election was rigged in favor of Joe Biden. Over the weekend, a Michigan judge allowed Trump's legal team to do forensic examinations on about 24 Dominion voting machines in Antrim County. Trump attorney Jenna Ellis told Fox News Sunday the team would have about 8 hours with the machines and have the results within 48 hours. Meanwhile, Senator Ted Cruz says he's willing to argue Pennsylvania's election case over mail-in ballots if the Supreme Court takes it up. The appeal is seeking to block the state from finalizing the certification of their election results. The former Texas solicitor said he was asked and he had agreed to stand ready to present oral arguments. Cruz served as the top litigation official in Texas between 2003 and 2008, making 9 appearances before the U.S. Supreme Court and authoring 80 briefs.
President Trump's team is back at Michigan's Supreme Court. The case revolves around whether poll challengers had enough access to properly observe vote counting in the state.
The campaign is appealing a majority decision in the appeals court. The case aims at Michigan's Secretary of State. It says Jocelyn Benson violated the state's constitution and election laws. In its brief, the campaign wrote, Secretary Benson's actions and her failure to act have undermined the constitutional right of all Michigan voters to participate in fair and lawful elections. The case was initially filed on November 4th. It sought to stop counting in the state until poll observers were granted meaningful access to view the handling of absentee ballots. Michigan has already certified its 2020 election results, but the campaign says it still has time because electors do not meet until December 14th, and the issue presented in the case are relevant to future elections.
Arizona's Republican leaders are calling to decertify the state's election results. And House Majority Leader Warren Peterson said a forensic audit of Dominion equipment and software needs to happen. NTD's Christina Kim has more.
Members of Arizona's Republican legislature joined the press conference, asking Governor Doug Ducey and the Secretary of State to decertify the state's election results.
In light of this election's chaos, as members and members-elect of the Arizona legislature, we call on the rescission. We call for the rescission of the certification of the 2020 general election.
Representative Bartow said should decertification actions not be taken, she would call for Congress to contest Arizona's electors. Other lawmakers echoed similar sentiments.
We certified the vote prematurely. Okay? So what we need to do is we need to investigate, we need to decertify until we are absolutely certain that this election was not stolen.
And if it's fraudulent, this election is fraudulent, and it needs the electors need to be decertified, the election needs to be decertified, and we need to award those electors to the previous election, which would be Donald Trump. If we find out who these perpetrating communist infiltrators are, they need to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Where we have over 28,000 duplicate ballots that we believe have a strong indication of irregularities.
Kirby told us she suspects much is happening behind the scenes that we are not aware of and believes President Trump will be sworn in for his second term on January 20th. 28 current and incoming Republican lawmakers signed the statement asking to decertify election results. But some Republican members, like House Speaker Rusty Bowers and President of the Arizona Senate Karen Fann, did not sign. Bowers said the rule of law forbids us from approving electors for a candidate who didn't win the state. Arizona's legislature is closing for 1 week after Rudy Giuliani, who attended the state's public hearing on November 30th, tested positive for COVID-19. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Trump campaign lawyer Jenna Ellis says she's confident at least one state government will not approve a Joe Biden win. That's as the president's campaign continues to press forward with lawsuits in swing states. Ellis and lawyer Rudy Giuliani are reaching out to state legislatures to inform them they have the authority not to certify their state's results in the face of massive voter fraud. Ellis told Fox Business that states have the obligation and responsibility not to move forward in the process to certify an election victory that they don't have confidence in. The campaign says it expects the government of Georgia will do so and hopes Michigan, Arizona, and Pennsylvania will follow. Ellis added they could reclaim their state's delegates before December 14th. Attorney Sidney Powell is appealing the dismissal of her Georgia election lawsuit. Powell says she's trying to get it to the Supreme Court as soon as possible.
Lawyer Sidney Powell asked the court Monday to immediately send a notice of appeal to the 11th Circuit Court. She says they want to proceed as quickly as possible to address urgent issues of national importance. A judge had dismissed Powell's Georgia election lawsuit earlier that day. He said the plaintiffs have no standing to sue. They should have brought it to a state court, and that they filed the case too late. Powell disagrees with those arguments. Plaintiffs are also asking the court to decertify Georgia's election results. Powell alleges several other categories of potential illegal votes. Each are enough to dispute the outcome of the election. Powell asked for a few days to examine the voting machines to find out what went on. She told the Epoch Times they're trying to take it to the Supreme Court as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Georgia's Secretary of State again certified election results in favor of Joe Biden Monday. It follows a second recount without signature verification. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp hasn't formalized the certification yet. The Trump campaign has repeatedly called for a more complete recount, including signature matching. They say without it, any recount would include fraudulent mail-in ballots. Trump campaign lawyers are calling on state lawmakers to take matters into their own hands. They say, regardless of state laws or certifications, the legislature still has the sole power to select presidential electors.
President Trump is calling out top Republicans in Georgia. He says their lack of action on election integrity could make the party lose 2 key seats in January's Senate runoffs. Those 2 seats could decide the balance of power in the Senate. The president tweeting late Monday that Georgia's Republican governor, lieutenant governor, and secretary of state will be responsible for the losses. He describes the 3 lawmakers as rhinos, or Republicans in name only, saying they didn't call a special session or check signature verification following allegations of election fraud. Fraud is also a growing concern for the upcoming runoff election. But Georgia's governor and lieutenant governor rejected a special session request to deal with the voter fraud concerns. Asian American Trump supporters came together in Georgia and held a candlelight vigil. They're praying that President Trump will stay in the Oval Office for 4 more years.
Trump supporters gathered in front of Georgia's state building to pray for the Trump family and the entire United States on Sunday. One attendee said there's enough evidence to overturn the election.
What also disturbed me greatly was the testimony of the USPS contractor that reported that hundreds of thousands of ballots were shipped from New York to Pennsylvania. Why would that happen? There's no good explanation for why that would happen.
Another rally attendee agreed with him, hinting that the election might have been stolen from President Trump.
I do the everyday door knocking, 200, 300, and I can see them meet the people, talk to the people. They support the Trump. I cannot believe it. We turn to the blue. If you people go out and talk to the people, you can see that.
Although the event was planned by an organization connected to Asian Americans, militias like the Oath Keepers showed up as well to try and keep the event safe.
Last time we didn't bring all the gear packed and everything. We weren't expecting opposition, but we had Antifa out here last time later in the night with long guns and things of that sort. So we knew that we were going to do another one again, and we just wanted to show up and make sure everyone was safe that time.
According to Joshua, Antifa is a serious threat.
Antifa is the modern-day brown shirts of Nazi Germany. The only thing different about them is instead of being ultra-nationalist, is they're ultra-globalist and ultra-anarchist.
He added that the silent majority of the country should speak up.
Another rally goes ahead in Iowa. Trump supporters gathered there over the weekend to show they stand with the president and to protest the allegedly unfair election. Many reported learning about ongoing election fraud lawsuits, but they explained they did not get the information from legacy media outlets.
In Des Moines, crowds of Trump supporters welcomed the March for Trump bus to Iowa. The eye-catching vehicle is currently on a cross-country tour. Major players in the conservative community came to speak at the rally, including Michael Lindell and Tana Gertz. Gertz said she came to help stop the steal of the election.
There is proof, there's video, there's everything, all the proof that they need. We just need the attorneys to do the job and to make sure that we get this overturned.
Some supporters detailed how people benefited from Trump's presidency. One person cited the agricultural industry.
Soybeans, the price of soybeans for a bushel was at $8 or lower for the last 8 to 10 years. You go check the markets today. Soybeans are almost $11 a bushel and climbing. So that's a $3 per bushel for each and every farmer. And if you look at also what it's done for the price of corn, the price of corn was like $3.25. It's over $4 now. So that's our farmers are being rewarded for their hard work and their efforts.
While others explained their views on how America could be worse off if Biden became president.
We got to get our president back in there, or I won't have a business. If Biden ends up getting in there, which he's not, us business owners are done. We're done.
Another Million MAGA march in Washington, D.C. is scheduled for December 12th.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says the Senate will consider the National Defense Authorization Act despite President Trump's threat to veto the bill. Trump wants the $740 billion legislation to terminate special protections for social media platforms. Every year, Congress approves the NDAA to fund the Department of Defense and the national security programs of the Department of Energy. Trump said in a December 1st tweet that he would scuttle the defense bill if it doesn't include a termination of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. That's the legislation that shielded social media companies from liability and allowed them to get away with massive censorship and unfairness to certain groups of users on their platforms, including the president. Still to come, California goes into a regional lockdown. We hear from some residents in Los Angeles on what they think. And New York Governor Cuomo said he might shut down indoor dining again. Dr. Anthony Fauci joined him during a CCP virus briefing. That and more when we return.
What does it mean to devote your life to the truth? Does it mean investigating communist subversion here in America? Does it mean exposing the deadly fentanyl crisis in the Midwest? Or spending late nights uncovering deep government corruption? Does it mean persevering over 20 years, even after 4 masked men set one of our printing presses on fire last year? Because at a time when America's traditional values are under attack, it's the responsibility of righteous journalists to uphold truth and tradition.
Chuck Yeager was the steely test pilot who took aviation to the doorstep of space. He became the first person to break the sound barrier more than 70 years ago. Sadly, he died on Monday at the age of 97. NTD reports.
The first pilot to break the sound barrier, Chuck Yeager, has died at 97. His wife Victoria announced his death Monday night. Yeager began his career in World War II as a private in what was then the U.S. Army Air Forces. He became a test pilot after the war, flying the experimental Bell X-1 at an altitude of 45,000 feet and becoming the first human to fly faster than the speed of sound. That test flight paved the way towards space exploration. Yeager later commanded fighter squadrons during the Vietnam War and was promoted to brigadier general in 1969 before his retirement 6 years later.
How's that feel?
He was also one of several people featured in the film The Right Stuff, adapted from the Tom Wolfe book about the early years of the U.S. space program. Wolfe said Yeager was blessed with the right stuff that made him a legendary test pilot. But Yeager said it was more a matter of luck, better than average vision, and a thorough knowledge of his planes.
A new report shows thousands of kids in Alabama are skipping school, and it shows grades across the country are plummeting. NTD's Christina Kim takes a closer look.
Preliminary reports show 5,000 students in Alabama's public school system aren't showing up to class, whether virtual or in person. Some may have switched to private schools, but many are unaccounted for, and the schools don't know where they are. Public schools lost about 4,700 students in 2018, but Alabama's education superintendent says this drop is more significant because it's widespread across the state. An expert in education policy says in Fairfax County, the largest school system in Virginia, F grades are up 83% over last year.
And vulnerable students, disadvantaged children, we're seeing huge increases among those students as well. Greenville County in South Carolina, the number of students receiving Fs has more than doubled compared to this time last year. We can look to Dallas, Texas, where last year at this time, the number of students who were on grade level in math in 5th grade stood at around 54% and has dropped down to 24%.
Burke says according to the McKinsey Institute, students will have lost between 3 months and 1 year of learning depending on the quality of their online instruction, and this impact compounds over the years. Burke says teachers' unions hold a lot of power and influence school closings. In November, D.C. public schools planned to reopen, but changed course shortly after the Fairfax Education Association, which represents public school teachers in Northern Virginia, said they don't want to resume in-person instruction until at least fall 2021.
And I would just add, so much of the union's effort to keep schools closed is not based in the science. It is based on politics more than anything else. And we can see that in places like Los Angeles, where the Los Angeles Teachers Union has said that they will not bless school reopening until things like defunding the police happen.
She said these school closings ironically have been encouraging school choice and freedom. Parents are pushed to explore options like homeschool, private school, and even joining micro schools and pandemic pods, where families bubble together to share curriculum and childcare. Christina Kim, NTD News.
And in Wisconsin, parents and the nonprofit organization School Choice Wisconsin are suing the city of Racine for shutting down schools. The school closings violate a Wisconsin Supreme Court order blocking the city from closing schools. Despite the court order, Racine's health official said school buildings will remain closed from November 27th through January 15th. Jim Bender is the president of School Choice Wisconsin. He called city officials drunk with power and noted the importance of reopening schools. Top infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci is warning of dark times in the pandemic. With the surge in new cases, New York is considering further shutdowns. NTD's Christina Kim reports.
Dr. Anthony Fauci says the country could go through a dark time in the middle of January. He joined New York Governor Andrew Cuomo for a briefing on Monday morning. Fauci says we'll see a surge of virus infections 2.5 weeks after people traveled for Thanksgiving. And there's more coming.
The problem is that's going to come right up to the beginning of the Christmas Hanukkah potential surge. So you have a surge upon a surge, and then before you can handle that, more people are going to travel over Christmas. So if those two things happen and we don't mitigate well, we don't listen to the public health measures that we need to follow, that we could start to see things really get bad in the middle of January.
Cuomo says he could shut down all indoor dining in New York City and decrease capacity in other regions.
5 days, if the hospitalization rate doesn't stabilize in New York City, we're going to close indoor dining. We're now at 25% in New York City. In the rest of the state, any region where the hospitalization rate doesn't stabilize, they're now at 50% capacity indoor dining. We're going to go to 25%.
Cuomo says the statewide infection is at 4.2% now, and he's following CDC guidelines. The Department of Health also issued an order to increase hospital bed capacity by 25%, though Cuomo says they could increase to 50% if needed. Cuomo and Fauci say if 80% of New Yorkers were vaccinated, it would help protect against more spread, but that it would be difficult to achieve. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Most Californians face a new wave of restrictions this week. We hear from some residents in Los Angeles on what they think of the new lockdown.
California Governor Gavin Newsom's order last Thursday covered places where fewer than 15% of intensive care hospital beds remain available. It is currently in effect throughout Southern California and the state's San Joaquin Valley. In Los Angeles, residents reacted to the new orders that took effect late Sunday night.
You're not going to get sick. You really aren't if you're careful. And that's all there is to it. And they're ruining the economy. They're breaking the people who own these small businesses.
California's order bans private gatherings of any size, shuts all but critical infrastructure and retail operations, and requires everyone to wear a mask and maintain physical distancing.
No, not now. I don't think the measures were needed, and I definitely think they're affecting the businesses that really need to be open. I think you can have outside seating. I've been seeing it, the social distancing work.
Another resident supported the new restrictions after the state reported more than 30,000 new cases on Sunday, an all-time high.
But I think it's a good thing, just given, the rapid rise in cases over the last week. I mean, that's a big, big climb there, so.
The sheriffs of Los Angeles, Orange, and Riverside counties have said they would not enforce the order. Newsom has said the state could withhold pandemic relief funds from counties that do not comply.
The pub owner who set up his own autonomous zone in New York City was arrested over the weekend. He allegedly hit a sheriff with his car during the arrest. NTD's Phil Zoe has the details.
The New York City pub owner who refused to close for the lockdown was arrested Saturday night for allegedly hitting a sheriff deputy with his Jeep and causing leg fractures. Louis Gerlomino is the attorney for Max Public House owners. He says the sheriffs are lying and exaggerated what happened. Instead, the sheriff's department sent 15 unmarked cars to arrest his client.
They came in, swept Danny away in 4 minutes, like he was Osama bin Laden in a CIA black ops. And in 4 minutes, you see nothing else on the scene. Not an officer, not a sheriff's deputy interviewing witnesses, not an ambulance, not an officer down. Ambulances never came to the scene.
Gerlomino says the owner would not have been released if he broke the deputy's leg.
Presti was released with no bail. If he ran over a sheriff's deputy, they would have asked for $500,000 in bail.
Gerlomino says the sheriff's department ambushed his client on a dark street.
on a dark street where two big burly officers came out between a parked car from behind him and yelled, "Presti, hey Presti," and started running at him. That's what started the whole set of events. It wasn't two officers in uniforms waving their badges.
A community activist says the pub owner was ambushed, but in a different way.
It's about our freedom and liberty. We probably wouldn't be standing here today talking about a political prisoner who was the victim of, in my view, a political ambush by the king and his henchmen.
He says New York's governor and the mayor are crushing the little guys who stand up to their lockdown orders.
The governor and mayor have set an arbitrary set of rules that just don't make sense to regular people. And we find out now that the first guy to stand up to the tyrants gets crushed.
Girolamo says they have 80% of the incident recorded on tape. He says when the investigation is over, they will release the footage and people will know the truth. Reporting in New York, Phil Zhou, NTD News.
8 men are arrested in Hong Kong. They participated in a pro-democracy march over the summer. They are the latest set of victims to the region's eroding freedoms. And China's biggest foreign car maker, Volkswagen, could be halting production there. That's amid U.S. sanctions that restrict the flow of microchips to China. That and more after the break.
Is deep-sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. Does not smell of fish and contain.
March has become an annual event in Hong Kong. Those arrested include former opposition lawmakers, incumbent opposition district councilors, and members of a pro-democracy party. The League of Social Democrats confirmed the arrest of 4 of its members in a Facebook post and called the arrests political persecution. Police also searched one member's home and demanded he hand over clothing worn during the July 1st protest. Police accused the 8 men of either inciting, organizing, or knowingly taking part in unauthorized assembly. They say it took place June 30th or July 1st, outside of the Court of Final Appeal. Hong Kong citizens march every year on July 1st to protest the erosion of freedoms in the region since its rule was handed over to Beijing. Washington brings 5 cultural exchange programs with China to an end. It's the latest U.S. crackdown on Beijing and marks worsening relations with the communist regime. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the exchange programs he ended were fully paid for and operated by the Chinese regime. He says they were actually soft power propaganda tools. The terminated programs include the Policymakers Educational China Trip Program, the U.S.-China Friendship Program, the U.S.-China Leadership Exchange Program, the U.S.-China Trans-Pacific Exchange Program, and the Hong Kong Educational and Cultural Program. Each program allowed U.S. officials to travel in China at Beijing's expense. Pompeo says mutually beneficial exchange programs will continue. The exercises will take place on one of Japan's uninhabited outlying islands in May. The Sankei newspaper says the focus will be on relief during natural disasters, but could also form the basis for defense. The Chinese regime currently claims Japanese-controlled islands in the East China Sea as its own and has increased Chinese naval activity in the area. France will also join the drills. The chief of staff of the French Navy told Sankei that the effort will send the Chinese regime a message about multilateral partnership and the freedom of passage. Now we look to a new move from Europe. The European Union and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, known as ASEAN, have agreed to upgrade their relationship. Now, it's classified as a strategic partnership. German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas says the EU country will stand up for the safe trade routes and free and fair trade. His comments came after a virtual meeting between the two blocs. Germany currently holds the EU's rotating presidency. The ASEAN Association consists of 10 countries in Southeast Asia. It doesn't include China. Experts have called the move a sign that EU countries are working to reduce their dependency on China.
U.S. sanctions affect more than Communist Party officials. Volkswagen, the biggest foreign automaker in China, might stop its operations, but the move would only affect plants in China.
Volkswagen, China's biggest foreign automaker, might stop part of its operations in the country. That's amid U.S. sanctions that restrict the flow of microchips to China. Volkswagen runs 3 joint ventures in China. One of them halted operations earlier this month. The second will soon follow suit. Combined, those 2 ventures can produce more than 200,000 cars a month. Just like in smartphones and other technology, chips act as the brain of the car. They're responsible for monitoring the car's sensors every time the engine starts. The White House is blocking Chinese companies from using American-made chips, including chips made using American technology. The imposed sanctions specially target companies with military and political ties to the Chinese Communist Party. The German car maker launched its first joint venture in China in 1984. It delivered more than 4 million cars to Chinese customers last year. Reporting by Becky Zhou, NTD News.
Coming up, Airbnb makes new rules meant to stop New Year's parties. The service uses certain criteria to decide whether a renter is likely to hold a party during the pandemic.